So with the Samsung Galaxy S24 right around the corner, I thought it would be the perfect time to look for one last time at the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, one of the best camera systems on a smartphone from last year, and a strong contender for best photography smartphone of the year, especially as there have been some crucial updates to the Galaxy S23 Ultra that have brought it from a competitive smartphone camera to one of the best on the market. So of course we're going to mostly talk about the camera capabilities for this particular smartphone, but I do think a special note should definitely go to the overall design and feel for this smartphone. There is absolutely no mistake that reviewers last year were kind of resounding in their feedback for the Galaxy S23 Ultra. It is a beautiful smartphone to hold in the hand. This kind of matte back metal, absolutely gorgeous but incredibly sturdy as well. It doesn't leave fingerprints like some other smartphones. It really is genuinely one of the most beautiful bits of hardware that I bought last year. In terms of a camera system, the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra was rocking a 4-camera setup, one of the only kind of major flagship phones to actually rock a 4x optical zoom range camera system. That was starting with a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 200 megapixel main rear facing camera, and of course we will talk about that sensor a little bit later, a 12 megapixel 3x and also a 12 megapixel 10x, and those are all optical zoom ranges.
I've decided to do the camera section just a little bit different than I would normally do in these videos, so definitely let me know with a comment down below whether you like this style. This is obviously a point of view segment. This is kind of me shooting POV with this camera, and you can actually see some of the techniques and shots that I'm actually taking almost like in real time. So I started off at the Natural History Museum. As you can see, the weather in the UK has been so bad recently, so actually shooting outside is a bit of a challenge, especially with a smartphone. I'm basically sticking mainly here to the 200 megapixel mode, as you can see, and I just absolutely love shooting with this mode. Like, the full resolution 200 megapixel photos are absolutely exceptional. You can see how much detail you get. If we punch in here, this is 300% on this image, and you can see just how crisp they really are. Quick side note, if anyone's not been to the Natural History Museum, and if you've spent any time in London or you're planning on spending any time in London, I thoroughly recommend it. It's absolutely beautiful and it's free entry. I've never actually filmed a POV section in the Natural History Museum, so this is a first for the channel. I hope you enjoy it. You can kind of see the really beautiful architecture that allows for some fantastic photos. These are a couple of interesting images here. So this one is shot with the 12 megapixel mode, so this is kind of like normal automatic, and then this one here is the exact same shot. As you can see, I took this exactly twice, exact same framing and everything, but this one is in the 200 megapixel mode. So we'll slap those side by side. You can actually see the kind of benefit of shooting 200, and we will talk about this slightly later. So my overall feeling for this phone for photography is that it is just fantastic. It's so versatile, and I think really that is down to the zoom range potential. So you can go from that ultra wide through to essentially a 230 millimeter zoom, and that just means that it's an extremely kind of capable and versatile camera system in your pocket. It's a bit like having a bag of lenses right in your pocket with this phone, and it is very, very fun to shoot with. I know the quality of some of these telephoto shots might not look it, and that certainly is a consideration, and we will absolutely talk about that later.
So something I absolutely love about this system, and I know I've briefly talked about it, but I will go into a little bit more detail, is the 200 megapixel sensor. And this is a slightly confusing one for me, because there's definitely a consensus in the photography world that more megapixels doesn't equal a better camera output. Simply shoving more and more pixels into an image is certainly going to give you more detail, but that definitely doesn't directly correspond to image quality. What I would say though is that actually shooting with this mode from Samsung, like the full kind of uncompressed 200 megapixel mode, whilst the images are an insane size, it actually does a lot of benefit for smartphone photography. So what this will do is it dramatically softens up your image and removes a fair bit of the kind of over processing that Samsung and other phone manufacturers like to do.
If we revisit that comparison, that side-by-side comparison that I showed you earlier, you can see this kind of in action. I hope this isn't lost too much over kind of YouTube compression and obviously the resolution limit that I'm actually exporting this video at, but hopefully you can see what I mean. Everything is softer while sort of retaining its quality and detail. It doesn't feel like it's a less detailed image, it actually just feels like it was taken with a more premium camera.
I would say that this is a happy medium between shooting raw, which takes a significant amount of time and effort to actually take that raw photo, go and edit it until you you're happy with an output that you actually like, and also shooting in the kind of standard 12 megapixel photo modes where Samsung is doing a lot of the processing for you and you kind of have no real control. Whilst on this 200 megapixel mode you definitely still have a lack of control, the actual processing is significantly lower, and you actually end up, even though the image is and should be a bit more detailed, you actually end up with a much softer and more aesthetically pleasing image. When I published my Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra review, one of my biggest complaints with the camera was that whilst you could shoot in this fantastic 200 megapixel mode, there wasn't actually a way to do that very efficiently. And this has been a massive improvement on the S23 Ultra, and it's the inclusion of a high efficiency image format. So all you do here is open up the camera settings application, and now I want you to scroll down to advanced picture options. This little option here, the top one, says high efficiency pictures. So if you go from toggling that off to toggle that on, what that will actually do is allow those 200 megapixel shots to be taken in full resolution in a much more efficient image codec. And this is big news because the previous iteration of the 200 megapixel modes, when those were kind of JPEG images, they would range from about 10 megabytes to about 40 megabytes in size. So that is obviously a very large image, especially for a JPEG. But I'm massively pleased to say that using this high efficiency image codec, it would actually bring your images down to a range of between 2 megabytes and 10 megabytes in file size. And this is a massive, massive win, and it means you can actually shoot in those 200 megapixel photo modes without actually having to worry about your image size almost at all. In terms of other updates that the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra has had throughout the year to improve its camera performance, a big one is the shutter speed and shutter lag. A lot of people were complaining about shutter lag on this camera. I myself was no different. It definitely isn't the fastest phone to actually shoot on. There's a setting that you can change in Camera Assistant, so what you'll have to do is you go again into the settings mode, scroll right down to the bottom, and you can hit on Camera Assistant. It basically allows you to take a photo and it will snap on the tap of the shutter button instead of the release of the camera button, which for some reason is a kind of a strange inclusion or a strange preference by Samsung that they actually do it on the release as opposed to the tap.
Something I was a bit disappointed by is I'd heard that the shutter lag performance had actually been improved on this phone. The idea that you could obviously just kind of tap away the shutter and there wouldn't be a delay in the photos. That seemingly doesn't seem to have happened. I obviously don't shoot with this phone day in, day out, so I was expecting the performance to have been increased over some of the updates throughout the course of the year, but that just doesn't seem to have been the case, sadly.
Something that Samsung still definitely has an issue with, though, is motion and kind of generally capturing motion on this phone. I think it potentially might be something to do with the 200 megapixel sensor. This is a bit of a guess here, but I'm going on the fact that because that's a worse performer in low light, there might be something to do with the fact that actually shooting at faster shutter speeds might be problematic with this main rear-facing camera, which does make sense. Certainly capturing moving subjects with this phone is and does continue to still be a challenge. The Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra is one of my favorite phones from last year, and I do think that it has one of the best camera systems and also most versatile camera systems for taking photos. In terms of improvements that I would like to see, hopefully in about a week, from the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, a biggest one and a biggest takeaway is video. So video on this phone is good, but it's not great. The iPhone 15 Pro and its release of Apple Log basically blows everything out of the water right now when it comes to smartphone videography. The S23 Ultra is no different. The iPhone 15 Pro Log is just gorgeous, and I'm really excited to see what Samsung have and what Google have in terms of an answer to this functionality. Like I said, that motion performance is still not great, so I'd like to see how Samsung plans to kind of actually improve the kind of shutter speed performance on the camera on the S24 Ultra, as that's still certainly one of the biggest areas of lacking performance compared to other smartphones. Devices like the Pixel 8 Pro, like the iPhone 15 Pro, are able to capture motion far more effectively than you can on the Samsung. And then my final preference for the S24 Ultra is that if Samsung are sticking with this kind of design of sticking with a main rear-facing lens, a medium telephoto, and then a kind of actual long telephoto lens, I would like to see the performance of the 10x be bumped up. In kind of well-lit scenarios and situations, it does perform absolutely fine. For instance, like if you're outside, maybe and you see an animal, if you've got that kind of strong natural ambient light, this will perform fantastically. The issue is that when you shoot any significant lower light situations, that 10x just starts to really break apart, and you can tell that the quality of that lens is just far lower than the others. But like I said, this is one of my favorite smartphones of the year, and I can't wait to see what Samsung does with the next iteration.